Welcome back to Frank Brief. Today we are going to do something a little bit different. I did it on the other episode, which is a reaction video. So I'll be reacting on geography now videos. These guys, they're so great. Pretty much great, very much. And some of them are a bit educational, and you get to know more about some places and some countries. So I do hope you love the videos. And on today's episode, I'll be reacting to Portugal video episode, and I hope guys you like it. If you do like it, comment there down, and don't forget to tell me which other country you like me to react to, or any video that you like me to react to. Yeah? And with that, let's get right onto the video. Stay tuned.
Some countries try to fight the ocean. Others are afraid of the ocean. Portugal practically wants to live in the ocean. If they had gills, they'd sell their land and build an Atlantis. Welcome to the powerful little sailor of Europe. Hey everyone, I'm your host Barbs. This episode couldn't have come at a better time because I literally just got back from a trip to Portugal with my mom. I met tons of you guys, the Portuguese geographies, and little side note. Hey everybody, this is João. He is a native Portuguese person. He'll be coming in and out of this episode explaining things about Portugal. So say hi.
Hi.
Anyway, let's look at the globe now, shall we? Portugal is sometimes called the door to Europe. It's the start to the mainland. The Portuguese are ocean people. They need to be close to the sea. They get uncomfortable without it. With that in mind, their country is pretty ideal for them location-wise. Portugal, the rectangle-shaped country, is located at the very end of the Iberian Peninsula, surrounded by Spain on all three sides, as well as two island regions in the Atlantic. They have the westernmost point of continental Europe, Cabo de Roca, and the westernmost point of Europe's domain, the island of Santa Cruz das Flores. Important note, Portugal has one of the oldest borders in Europe and one of the oldest in the world, very much thanks to this treaty signed between these two kings back in 1297. Spanish and Portuguese have always usually had amicable relations in regards to their states. The only kind of dispute they have is over the town of Olivença. This is not an official dispute, but most Portuguese believe that it kind of probably should be theirs because of history or something. Look it up. For what it's worth though, there's even a spot where you can zip line across this river from Portugal into Spain and travel forward 1 hour in time because for some reason Portugal decided to follow the UTC +1 zone instead of +2 like Spain, meaning that even though Galicia is on the same longitude, they are 1 hour ahead. Anyway, the country is divided into 18 districts and 2 autonomous regions, the Azores and Madeira Islands. These 2 island regions give a huge boost to Portugal's exclusive economic zone by over 1.7 million square kilometers, making it the 3rd largest EEZ in the EU and the 20th in the world. The capital is Lisbon, and of course it holds the largest airport, Lisbon International, as well as the largest shipping port, the Port of Lisbon. The 2nd largest city is actually Sintra, followed by Vila Nova de Gaia. However, Porto actually holds the 2nd busiest airport, and Faro in the south rounds out for 3rd place for airports as well. Remember, even though these little uninhabited guys known as the Savage Islands are closer to the Canary Islands of Spain, they actually belong to Portugal and make up the southernmost part of Portugal's domain. One of which right here, Pontina, is actually a self-proclaimed micronation purchased by some art teacher dude who bought it and then later claimed independence from Portugal in 2007. Keep in mind, these overseas regions, in addition to the Canary Islands and Cape Verde, are part of a larger oceanic region known as Macaronesia, not to be confused with Micronesia, which is halfway across the world. Yeah, that micronation island thing, that's a weird one. Look it up. They kind of have all they need in that small space as long as they have the largest portion of the Atlantic coast on the Iberian Peninsula. This is kind of what allowed them to become the front runners in the age of discovery and European expedition years. Most of the first and famous explorers you've probably already heard of, Magellan and Vasco da Gama, they come from Portugal. Ahem. Yeah, you guys took the Arctic and Finland like hundreds of years earlier. For what it's worth though, it's important to note that historically, not only were the Portuguese the first to kick off the age of exploration with the first discovery at the Azores and Madeira Islands, but they also had a vast empire at one point expanding across 5 continents as far as East Timor to Brazil and everything in between. The problem was, with the exception of Brazil and
with that, actually their empire extended up to East Africa. You can see the red dot there at Mozambique, but it was also at the coastal of Kenya, because in 1592, the first Portuguese arrived at Kenyan coast where they were seeking a sea route to India. They loved the place and they decided to make a domain from it. From there, they met a rebellion from the Omani Arabs, whom they fought most parts, so they needed a fort to secure their place there. So they built the Fort Jesus in Kenya, which is a historical site right now because it have survived since 1500s up to now. It is still there. Also, Vasco da Gama came through to Mombasa. He built a pillar, and on top he put a cross, which provoked the Omani Arabs who were there, and fight between the Portuguese and the Arabs began, which led to the fort being overtaken on multiple times. Yeah. So the Portuguese and the ocean, they are like this, always together.
Angola and Mozambique, the Portuguese really only kind of maintained numerous ports and coastal colonies that didn't encroach far inland with the connecting land masses. Their love of the ocean kind of ended up diminishing much of their land claims, and the majority of the ports were either fought over and lost or sold to other colonial powers of the 18th and 19th centuries. Nonetheless, outside of the sovereign Portuguese-speaking countries today, you will see small remnants of Portuguese influence in places like China's special autonomous region of Macau, with its Portuguese-named streets, and the churches and culture of areas like Goa, as well as Dammam and Diu in India. Anyway, this segment is getting kind of long. Here are some places of interest that you guys, the Portuguese people, suggested we mention in this episode. They have 17 UNESCO heritage sites. Many of them are famous monasteries or churches or sanctuaries. Sintra has that cool national palace thing, and this grotto palace. Guimarães has that castle where Portugal kind of started. Ericeira is like the best surfing spot. Pretty much the entire city of Porto with its colorful neoclassical and Baroque charm. They also have the coolest bookstore ever and the most beautiful McDonald's, those older homes in Monsanto, the castle of Óbidos. Évora has like the best historic sites and even a Portuguese Stonehenge. Coa Valley rock art sites, the world's shortest international bridge with Spain, the cemetery of Anchors, the Monte Penedono Dolmen, pretty much everything on Madeira Island with its beaches and botanical gardens, museums. This one is even dedicated to Ronaldo. Lisbon has so many sites like the Belém Tower, the Jerónimos Monastery, and every year there is a huge pilgrimage to the town of Fatima, one of the holiest sites in Portugal. Yeah, and that's the thing about Portugal. Like, once someone finds a cool hidden natural spot, it usually gets exposed and invaded fast. And speaking of nature, that brings us to... Now, as mentioned, Portugal is an ocean-loving country that loves the sea and water. Nonetheless, the actual people do need to kind of live on land and like grow food on it and stuff. So yeah, this is how you break it down. Portugal's land makeup, of course, is made up of the two main parts that fall under Portuguese sovereignty: the continental Portuguese landmass on the Iberian Peninsula and the two island regions of the Açores and the Madeira Islands. The continental part of Portugal is located on the Eurasian plate, close to the convergence of the African plate. Geologists speculate that there could be a newly emerging rift which could explain some of the seismic activity, such as the Great Lisbon earthquake of 1755 that nearly destroyed the entire city on All Saints' Day. Look it up. Anyway, the northern parts are generally more mountainous and hilly, with two main mountain chains: the northern Meseta Mountains and the Cerro da Estrela, which has Torre, the tallest point on the mainland. However, if we're talking about the tallest point in the entire country, that actually belongs to Mount Pico on Azores Island. Back to the mainland, though, the country is shaped by three main rivers: the Douro in the north, the longest river of the country; the Tagus, or Taj, and the Guadiana in the south, which feeds into the largest lake of the country, Lake Alqueva, which is actually a reservoir created by the Alqueva Dam. The south of the country, known as the southern Meseta, is generally flatter and lush, with the Sado Basin fed by the Sado River. Skipping over to the island regions, the Azores and Madeira Islands are volcanic archipelagos, generally lush and green, and mild to warm year-round. Madeira actually has a UNESCO nature zone, the Laurisilva, or laurel forests of the north side. For the Azores, they are kind of precariously positioned right at the triple junction of three tectonic plates, and the westernmost islands, Corvo and Flores, are actually located in the North American plate. They are beautiful green islands that actually kind of resemble the Irish countryside, with farm plots dotted everywhere. This island chain is also the only part of Europe, if you don't consider the Caucasus part of Europe, where tea can be cultivated naturally in its environment. Phew, that was pretty compact in detail, and we didn't even get to talk about all the cool stuff like the cave beach of Benagil, or this tidal pool, or that place where the largest wave ever was surfed by that dude.
Oh, that was Portugal?
Yes, it was. Look it up. In the meantime, you know the deal. I take my triple shot of espresso break, which means Noah comes in to fill in for the rest of this segment.
Somebody say Keith?
No, I
I believe he said Noah. For one, they are masters of making anything out of trees, as over a third of the country is forested mostly with oaks, pines, and eucalyptus. Such Portuguese companies like the Navigator Company are world-renowned for paper products. And Amorium is the world's largest cork producer, in Portugal being #1 in cork production in general. You will see tons of stuff from Portugal made of cork. Cork purses, cork shoes, cork notebooks, cork everything. And they love their wine, with port, rosé, green, and Madeira wines being some of the most popular types. Portugal is home to many animal species as well. In the continental side, you will find mammals like wild pigs, wild goats, hares, foxes. The unofficial national animal, though, or at least a common national symbol, would technically be the legendary mythical Barcelos rooster. They're Europe's top seafood consumer per capita and usually in the top 4 worldwide. And of course, brings us to the final segment, food. Some top notable dishes you guys, Portuguese geography suggests we mentioned include things like the most iconic national soup, caldo verde. These two sandwiches are probably the most popular ones. Pastéis de nata. And finally, with seafood, they have everything from cuttlefish, crabs, shrimp, spiny lobster, barnacles, mackerel, lamprey, sea bass, clams, oysters, periwinkles, scallops, sardines.
Dude, the Portuguese make the best octopus I ever had in my life.
Fun fact, the Portuguese actually introduced samosas to India, tempura to Japan, and England probably wouldn't have tea if the Portuguese hadn't traded with China. And of course, the most popular dish in Portugal, often seen as the national dish, bacalhau, which is salted cod, deliberately preserved and soaked before cooking. Interestingly enough, cod isn't even commonly caught off their coasts, so they have to resort to importing it usually from the North Sea. Their national dish isn't even really found naturally in their own country. But what does occur naturally in Portugal are the Portuguese people. Let's meet them, shall we?
Thank you, Noah. Keith again. Art, take care of this.
Oh my god. Oh!
You're welcome.
Now, I asked João to describe the Portuguese, and here are some things he said.
It's like a resourcefulness of ways. So if you give us like a corkscrew and a frisbee, they'll give you a scooter. Another one is estar com os azeites, when someone is really grumpy or in a real bad mood.
To sum it up, that's the ideal Portuguese way. In any case, the country has about 10.5 million people, and they are one of the top aging populations in the world and has the highest emigration rate in the EU. The exact numbers are not always completely reliable, but many sources on average report that somewhere around 90 to 95% of the population identifies as Portuguese. But that term is very broad, as there are many different types of Portuguese people that look totally different from the others. Some of them are blonde hair and blue-eyed, and some are tan and olive and brunette. Either way, Portuguese. The remainder of the 5 to 10% of the population comes from all over the world, mostly Europe and former colonial states like Brazil, Angola, and Mozambique, and even a small Asian minority as well, mostly Macau Chinese, and India from Goa and Daman and Diu. Usually enough, Galicians and North Portuguese people have Celtic roots. We'll talk more about that in the Spain episode. But anyway, Portugal also technically has a second regionally official language, Mirandese, which is only spoken by about 15,000 people in 2 municipalities of the Northeast region. But otherwise, okay, just being straight up, Portuguese is the most difficult Latin language for me personally. But after spending some time in Portugal, I figured out a shortcut if you want to learn how to speak Portuguese. Here's how you do it. Step 1, be Russian. Step 2, get drunk. Step 3, try to speak Spanish. Meu nome é Paulo, eu gosto de pastis de melão. Calm down, this was a joke. Geography Now does not endorse underage drinking or alcoholism. And also, do not confuse the Portuguese with the Spanish. They hate that. Actually, when I met João, I had this conversation with him. Hey, João,
Yes?
when I go to Portugal, would it be okay if I spoke some Spanish just in case if I had a complete communication problem?
Yeah, no, don't. Just don't. Trust me, you're better off just using English.
So anyway, the Portuguese, as mentioned, have a lot of ocean history and Catholic roots. About 81% of the country identifying to varying degrees of devotion as Roman Catholic. The Portuguese aren't too quick to note that they did kind of start the Atlantic slave trade, although keep in mind the East African slave trade was actually started centuries prior by Arabs in the Indian Ocean. Moving on, Portuguese culture comes in many fascinating, vibrant forms of tradition and custom. And with that, here's Random Hannah to explain.
Portugal today is a very distinct nation, but if you dig close, you can see the layers of influence from groups like Phoenician, the Celtic, Germanic, Visigoth, Viking, Sephardic, Jewish, and Moorish people. Yeah, even Vikings.
And don't you forget it.
Of course, as intrepid maritime folk, the Portuguese were the first to invent galleon ships that launched off the age of discovery for Europe, post-Viking era. With that, they also created the first forms of Western-style nautical cartography and navigation. It would later be taught and used across the continent. One guy even tried to pioneer one of the first airship designs. Although Portugal may not be well known for their painters or graphic arts, I mean, this dude went crazy and burned every single one of his paintings except one. They definitely have a tradition of three-dimensional expression that dates back centuries. Distinct Portugal styles include things like Manueline architecture of the 16th century, and even today, people like Bordalo II continue the tradition of three-dimensional art. Fun fact, you can probably guess a home is Portuguese if the exterior walls have tiles on them, and often blue pattern tiles. They have their own unique Portuguese sport, where you have to knock off a pen with metal discs and varying weights and sizes. Nonetheless, no shocker, soccer or football is the most popular sport, with their oldest club dating back to 1893 in Porto. Their national team has consistently ranked high in FIFA standings. We all know Ronaldo is the most mainstream, noteworthy face of Portuguese football today. I mean, the guy has multiple statues of himself. The legendary Eusebio is considered one of the greatest football icons of all time and the symbol of the nation's sport. Festivals, of course, adorn the entire nation from north to south, many rooted in Catholic tradition. June is a huge month where the Festival of the Three Saints take place all over the country, honoring St. Anthony, John, and Peter, where there's a lot of wine and sardines with fireworks. There's also many unique regional festivals like the Festa de Coco, in which they do fun dragon slaying performances. There's the Lazarine Carnival, one of the only places where Celtic rituals can be seen. Anyways, the festivities are usually filled with music, which I guess means we're moving on to Keith's segment.
Alright, starting as early as Gregorian chants in the medieval ages, evolving into the classical era, and eventually winning Eurovision, Portugal has had lots of musical accolades. And there's a certain word that kind of describes the overall feeling of Portugueseness when it comes to music. Saudade. Translates to something like a sense of melancholy and longing, as if something were missing. This type of mindset is one of the key elements that inspired the most famous of all Portuguese musical genres, fado. It's even listed as a UNESCO heritage trait. The most recognizable name with fado being Amália Rodrigues. Listen to it and see what you think. Portuguese have their own version of guitars, drums, accordions, even bagpipes. The ukulele from Hawaii was actually introduced from the Portuguese migrants, mostly from the Azores and Madeira Islands, where my ancestors are actually from. Fun fact. Today, the Portuguese music scene has everything from mainstream hip-hop, rock pop, metal, Moonspell being one of the more popular metal bands from Portugal. One time I saw Moonspell at, I think it was Ozfest. I don't remember. Moonspell is awesome.
And thank you, Keith. All right, and with that, we got to move on to the incredibly condensed history section. Proto-Iberian cultures, Indo-European migrations, Atlantic Bronze Age, Lisbon founded, Phoenicians, Proto-Celts, Rome comes in, Christianity, persecution of Christians, Visigoths, Vandals, Moors, Muslim years, Vikings come in briefly from the north parts, fighting, blah, blah, blah. They get their first king after independence from Leon. Uninhabited Madeira and Azores Islands discovered. Age of Discovery kicks off. Atlantic slave trade, colonies established, Inquisitions, Great Earthquake of 1755, Napoleon years, first constitution, last monarch deposed, Republic, World War I, joins Allied forces, World War II, gets messy, Salazar begins his reign, colony wars in Africa, colonies gain independence, but Timor is still on hold, new constitution, joins EU, World's Fair Expo, releases Macau, releases East Timor, hipster shops and trendy yet pretentious warehouse district cafes open up, and here we are today. We asked you guys for a list of some of the top notable people from Portugal or of Portuguese descent, and they include people like Prince Henry the Navigator, even though he never really did any exploring himself, Bartolomeu Dias, Vasco da Gama, Ferdinand Magellan, these athletes, these two popes, Nobel Prize winner in medicine Egas Moniz, the greatest writers Luis de Camões, Fernando Pessoa, and Jose Saramago, Daniela Rua, Carmen Miranda, Maria João Pires, Sara Sampaio, Paula Rego, and some American and Canadian celebrities that have Portuguese descent include Nelly Furtado, Shawn Mendes, one of my favorite animators, J.G. Quintel, even Tom Hanks, and this guy, I guess, you got Portuguese, right?
Yeah, totally, man. Great grandpa. He was born in the Madeira Islands.
Keith Everett. Well, as
So that was the video. Hope you guys liked it. Don't forget to comment, share, and like and subscribe. Yeah. Till next time, stay tuned. Geography now.